Good morning. Bill Carroll for Zennie62 Media. Back to 32 teams, 32 games. No, 32 teams, 32 days. It's more like 34, I guess, because of some slight interruptions. But amongst the closest, most successful, and most intimate relationships between general manager and coach, who is also a member of the front office, is Pete Carroll and John Schneider. John Schneider, of course, was raised in the Packer way. Came up under their, I think, future Hall of Famer in Ted Thompson. And Ted Thompson was one of the real disciples of draft and develop. He came up under, of course, Ron Wolf. So you could sort of say by extension, Schneider came from the Wolf family tree of front office personnel. Spent many years with the Packers, spent 1 year with, who was it? Somebody else, and then made his way to the Seahawks. And in John Schneider, you see a guy who, one, enjoys his job, I think, more than probably all but maybe one or two general managers I know of in the NFL. I think Jerry Jones really enjoys it also, though he's sort of a general manager with an asterisk. But you see a certain joy in the job. He and Pete Carroll both are like zest for living guys, but they draft differently. Sometimes much better than people would think when they originally look at how they draft. And they're often proven right with some of their sort of unusual ways of drafting, but also sometimes proven very wrong. They're willing to take risks on players that have had season-ending injuries while in college. Sometimes guys who have multiple season-ending injuries while in college. They're willing to take chances on guys who may have had some character concerns. And they're willing to take chances on guys that fall outside of certain parameters in terms of both physical stature, testing, a bunch of things. They do really believe in spark, which I won't go too deep into, but it's a gumbo metric, to quote my friend Geometrics, James Coburn. Shout out to Jim Coburn, who I think coined the term gumbo metric, meaning you pour a bunch of stuff in there because it looks at like a medicine ball throw and jumps and a bunch of things, sort of piles them all together, sort of like the relative athletic score that my friend Kent Lee Platt came up with, aka Math Bomb, who has rightly gone from being a guy used to talk to guys like me on Twitter to a guy that NFL teams and others talk to, and not just on Twitter, and deservedly so. Really smart guy. So, John Schneider, what's he like? Well, I mean, he worked his way up and worked his way up, so he came up the quote-unquote right way. He's one of those guys who got, some people don't like it, but pulled in from some other industry or some other place. He fought his way here. I'm going to look at the 2020 draft real quick. Jordan Brooks, the undersized-ish, but I guess the trend, they were sort of with the early part of that trend towards smaller inside linebackers, who got a chance to play with Bobby Wagner and now is back, I guess, to play with Bobby Wagner, but was intended to replace essentially what they're going to lose in Bobby Wagner. Really good athlete, very, very smart, and very productive. Was a guy that, holds the team's record for tackles. Had 184 tackles, which is just an insane number. And when healthy, and he's mostly been healthy, he's had really one, injury-marred season, but has otherwise been healthy, is the leader, one of the leaders, if not the leader of the defense. And, some people were critical because they needed offensive line help so desperately in 2020, and they went with a linebacker and a small-ish linebacker that some people weren't sold on. I loved his production, and he's continued to produce. While he may never be a superstar, he's going to be a guy that goes to, he may never be all-pro. Well, actually, he may even be all-pro. He's good. He's a good selection. I give that selection of him, at the worst, a B+, A-, B+. If you want to grade it on a grading scale like that. But he's a really good player. He's going to be a player for a long time for them. So while I don't care about need as much as some people do, so I was never as down on the pick as some people were. And then Darrell Taylor right after that, obviously, once again, people who were beating the drum for offensive line help, got madder at that. And he's had some ups and some downs as a player. Once again, mostly due to injury. He was a guy that had some injuries in college and lost his entire his entire rookie year to injury. But in the 32 games in which he has played, he has been fairly productive. He already has 16 career sacks, including one season where he had 9.5 sacks, which was 2022. So there's a guy that's looks like he's going to average about 8 sacks a season. I can't knock that pick too much. Once again, didn't address need that much. For me, the most problematic pick for them came at pick number 4, or round 4. Oh, well, let me just skip over Damian Lewis. Okay, this is a pick I was a little critical of, and I've come around on it. I was wrong when I criticized him for picking. I mean, once again, he's an offensive lineman. I think I might have given it a C or something. I don't know. I can't remember what I gave it, but I needed to raise that. That's worst case scenario, B+. A tremendous run blocker, a guy with a 635-pound squat on his resume coming out of college at LSU. A good enough pass guy, but I mean, he holds up in pass protection, though he gets a little grabby, but an absolute killer in the run game. Okay, so the pick I was most critical of, both then and now, it's still Colby Parkinson. I wasn't super impressed with him at Stanford. I thought that I thought they would want more of a blocker, and he's not a terrible blocker, but he's not a wipe you out blocker. He's not super athletic. He's an above, for his size, a slightly above average to average. Yeah, average, much testing you're talking about, but really an average to slightly below average in terms of explosion, and probably average to slightly above average for his length, right? So I think he did 18 reps with very long arms, but nothing about him stood out to me at Stanford, other than that he was a Stanford tight end. Those guys sort of automatically get a little push because it's a tight end school. They in I guess Iowa are fighting it out for who's tight TEU, but I didn't love that pick then. I like it even less now. He's struggled once again with injury, which is beyond his control. But I didn't like the pick, and I think it was probably a D for me. It's maybe a D- for me. Now, DJ Dallas, however, yeah, that's a B+ to A- pick. You're getting him at the right pick, at pick 144. He's produced all throughout his career. A pick I really liked at the time, and I think I gave maybe even an A-, was the Alton Robinson pick at pick 148. He hasn't really panned out for them so far. I was a big fan of his, but he's appeared in 30 games, has a handful of starts, but 5 sacks, 26 tackles, and 2 forced fumbles, which is actually a good number considering he only has a handful of starts in his career. If he's a full-time starter and starts to really become the other guy pass rusher to Taylor, I may have to go back and revisit and raise that grade. Now, a few things about their first pick. Once again, I was critical of the fact I thought they could have traded down into the second and still gotten Jordan Brooks. But right behind them, at pick 28, the Baltimore Ravens took Patrick Queen. Now, maybe they liked Queen better than Brooks, but maybe they were hearing that the Ravens really loved Brooks and that he wouldn't be there if they didn't pick him there. Maybe. And maybe they didn't like Patrick Queen as much. I don't know. You don't get to see the team's boards, but that's the one thing I'll sort of say to sort of adjust my thinking. But when I looked at the fact that I really liked Jeff Gladney, he hasn't really panned out. But I really also like T. Higgins, and he has definitely panned out. Michael Pittman Jr., he's definitely panned out. Once again, those are not positions of desperate need, but I had higher grades on those players than I did on Brooks. I had late first-round grades on both Pittman and Higgins. And then I'll mention, last but not least, though, once again, not a desperate need, you had both DeAndre Swift and Kyle Duggar. And I had, once again, I think Kyle Duggar might have been my number 29th ranked player. That's another player I really thought they could have used. But they did not choose badly. And I'll mention one other player that, Jonathan Taylor, once again, not a desperate need. But Laviska Shenault, who hasn't quite panned out also, was another player that I had tried to sort of consider. I think he might have been my last first-round grade, in fact. My 32nd ranked player, I believe that year, was Laviska Shenault. But let's keep plowing forward. So, in the last few picks, Freddie Swain and friend of my show, Stephen Sullivan, who did appear on my CDS Pro Prospects football radio, Freddie Swain has actually exceeded expectations and has outproduced, frankly, Colby Parkinson. This guy's 534, total yards. I think 320 something, 300. I mean, a guy who's produced, 576 yards in receiving, I believe. So we're talking about a guy that was seen as sort of a special teamer and has exceeded expectations. Also, you throw in that return yards, right? 326 return yards with that 42 catches. That's, while it's very late, 214 picks in, that's a guy, I don't see how you give that pick anything less than a B plus or an A minus. And though he's not on the team anymore, the only reason it's not a higher grade to me is that he's not on the team anymore. And he's now, I think he's signed a futures contract with the Dolphins. And then Stephen Sullivan's a guy they sort of messed around with. He was a wide receiver mostly in college, played a little bit of tight end at the end of his collegiate career at LSU. And they took a flyer on him because he ran 4.66 and was a 248-pound former wide receiver, and they were going to try to turn him into either a tight end or a defensive end, and he literally was listed as both early in his career. And he's now signed a futures reserves contract with the Panthers, and I think he has a chance to do something there. But, he's a developmental player. I'm still going to call that a good, solid, B minus C. The fact that he's still playing football, and you pick, right at the very end of the draft at, I think, 251. But let's look at the depth chart. As of 2020, they had, of course, Russell Wilson, Geno Smith, right? And Geno Smith's still there, but at the top, and then Anthony Gordon. A lot of people like coming out of Washington State, and Danny Etling, who not as many people watched out of Purdue/LSU. A lot of LSU players, but clearly great value in bringing in Geno Smith. And then the running back room has really changed since those days. Shout out to DJ Dallas and Travis Homer, though, for exceeding many people's expectations. But in those days, they had Chris Carson, they had Carlos Hyde, and Rashad Penny. And then Rashad Penny was dealing with injuries. Chris Carson eventually has suffered a career-ending injury. So a lot of change there. Top of the wide receiver room, the two headliners are still the same in Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. In those days, he also had Philip Dorsett II. They had David Moore, once again, the aforementioned Freddie Swain and John Ursua. All of the lower guys have all changed. They had Greg Wilson at tight end in those days, along with Will Dissly, Jacob Hollister, and Luke Wilson. A lot of change there. The offensive line had, at the very end of his, useful, William Brown was a great player for a long time, but towards the end of his career was there. They had Eason Posich, Mike Iupati, Eason Posich, the aforementioned Damian Lewis, the rookie guard from LSU, B.J. Finney, who was in there with Posich, also sort of for the center position, Brandon Shell, Phil Haynes, Jordan Simmons, Jamarco Jones, and Cedric Abui. Very mixed bag of, guys at the end of the career, guys at the beginning of the career, and nobody really playing super well, quite frankly, which is why there was all that noise about why not drafting offensive line more often and earlier in that draft. And that's why I saw some lower grades, some C's and things like that on that draft. They've been proven right in a lot of those positions. They missed on a couple of them, and like I said, I was mostly critical of the Colby Parkinson selection, and I still am. And then the defensive line those days was L.J. Collier, Rasheem Green, Benson Mayowa, also Demontre Moore, Alton Robinson, Poona Ford, Brian Monet, who was an undrafted free agent from Michigan, who has exceeded expectations. Jaron Reed, who I didn't love in college, and I think I've been proven at least somewhat right on him. And then linebacker Bobby Wagner, there, left, back again. KJ Wright, he's going to go into their ring of honor someday. Bruce Irwin, who, solid player for them for many years. Cody Barton, the aforementioned Jordan Brooks, who is still there and the leader of the defense. And then Ben Burke-Kirven, who some people absolutely loved. I liked, but it wasn't as... His testing underwhelmed me a little bit. And then at corner they had Shaquille Griffin, who of course, very notably came to them. Trey Flowers, who was one of those Seattle corners who was a converted safety, right? Moving from safety to corner, which is a thing that pretty much Seattle is on a short list of teams who even drew. Quentin Dunbar, Nico Thorpe, and Lyndon Stevens. And of course, people made jokes about going from the Legion of Boom to Legion of Whom. But then, of course, they had Jamal Adams, once again, who's following the Bobby Wagner plan of leaving and coming back. Now back on the team. Quandre Diggs, Marcus Blair, who a lot of people liked coming out of Utah. Ugo Amadi and Lano Hill. And, of course, Michael Dixon, Jason Myers, and their long snapper was Tyler Ott as of those days. Now, I'm going to compare that with 2023 and then look at the 2023 draft. So, Metcalf still is the guy at the classic X, but look at the guys behind him. They clearly have a type, right? Big, and with the exception of one of them, super freaky athletes. Huge athlete in Metcalf, and then Derek the Freak Young, right? I mean, his name's a freak for a reason. Tremendous tester, big body. If he becomes something this year, watch out. And then Matt Landers, right? I guess the thinnest of the bunch at just right at 200 pounds, but with a frame where he could easily put on 12 to 17 pounds, I would think, with ease. The only guy who's not a freak amongst the group is Jake Bobo, who's a big guy, almost like a mini tight end, but didn't test all that well. I think I was a college free agent from UCLA. And then Tyler Lockett. I was a huge fan of his coming out back in Kansas State back in the day, and he's been on the team and produced as a special teamer immediately right out of the box and became a really good wide receiver for them, now going into his ninth year? Well, 2015, yeah, okay. And then they have Cody Thompson, Aesop Wilson, and John Hall. I still think that they could use a little more competition, behind him. Jonathan Smith-Njigba is already penciled in as the slot guy with D. Eskridge, who they slightly overdrafted, I would say, in 2021, taking him in the second, who felt more like a third, fourth kind of player, but a player I like, but with his age, also an older player. Cade Johnson, one of my small school guys I really liked, and then behind him, Tyjon Lindsey, who, once again, college free agent, another Pac-12 kid, big time, I think 5-star high school recruit. And if he puts it all together, he might eventually push his way to the number 2 spot at the slot. Charles Cross, who definitely worked out, came to them in the first in 2022. The aforementioned Damian Lewis, who was part of that 2020 class. Also, Evan Brown has now displaced, the Finney-Posich combination that they once had, finding it out at center. They still have Phil Haynes at the right guard. Ola Olawatimi is behind Brown at center, who came to them from Detroit. And they also have Joey Hunt, who came from San Francisco last year. I believe it was last year. But former San Francisco 49er. Then Phil Haynes, penciled in at right guard. And Anthony Bradford is behind him, who they drafted in the 4th. And then you have Abram Lucas. Very good pick. I think I was higher on him the most. I think they're going to be set at that position for, I think, another 7-8 years. And then they have Jake Curran, who came as a college free agent in 2021. And then Greg Bland, another college free agent, came in 2021. They may want to still see if they can maybe they can pick up a low-priced bargain basement kind of free agent to add to that mix, because that's not great depth. If Lucas gets hurt, they are looking at maybe tossing Stone Forsythe or Jalen McKenzie, who are listed at backup left tackle. Maybe will be playing right tackle for them. Their tight end depth chart is solved for X right now at the moment, which is funny to me because, they seem to prize the position, but right now it's mostly Noah Fant, and then they still have Will Dissly, Colby Parkinson, who's, maybe this is the year he busts out. And Tyler Mabry, who was a college free agent in this most recent class, and Noah Jindorf might end up panning out for them. Who also was an interesting college free agent. So they have a couple of interesting college free agents: Colby Parkinson, Will Dissly, and then Noah Fant, who came in the Russell Wilson trade. Maybe Fant has a great breakout year. He certainly has been productive-ish, but I wouldn't mind. If I were a Seattle fan, if they sort of added somebody else, maybe once again a lower-priced free agent somewhere into that mix. The aforementioned Geno Smith, who's really panned out for them big time, backed up by Drew Lock and Holt Nailers. Once again, another position you may want to address by finding yourself one of those, veteran free agents who's still out there on the street. And then the fullback has been Nick Bellore, who came over from Detroit. So the defensive line group. Defensive end is Draymond Jones, came by way of, once again, the aforementioned Denver Broncos. They also have Mary Edwards Jr., who I don't know. Maybe there's something there that I don't see. I've never been impressed with him, and I'm not quite sure why it is I don't know. Maybe he's better than I think. But he's one of those players where I always wonder how he's still always in the mix in position battles. And you have MJ Anderson behind him and Jacob Sykes, both of whom are college free agents in this most recent class. Brian Monet, I mentioned earlier, they really hit on a college free agent back in 2019. He's become their starter there. A mountain of a man, 337 pounds, I believe, and just very difficult to move. He doesn't give you a lot other than sort of run plugging and eating up space, but he's good at it. Cameron Young's behind him, and Jonah Tavai behind him. College free agents in case of Tavai, and then a fourth rounder in Cameron Young, and then Austin Raolo's behind those guys. Former San Francisco 49er, who seem to have a lot of guys on other teams' rosters. Then Jerron Reed, who is still there and playing. You know what? I don't know. I didn't love him coming out of college. He's better than I think he is, and I just need to get over my little weirdness. But he's a solid player. I still think I would be looking to upgrade that position. Miles Adams is behind him, who, of course, came from San Francisco. And Mike Morris is sort of an interesting guy in that mix, a guy who they got in the 5th round, a tweener, defensive tackle, defensive end tweener. If he hits, then you've got some competition there. And then the aforementioned Mr. Darnell Taylor's listed at left outside linebacker with Boye Mafe, Tyreek Smith, and Justin Underju behind him. Taylor, like I said, has played well when healthy. You have Jordan Brooks, who sort of runs the show, next to Bobby Wagner, who ran the show for so long, and they were teammates. So obviously those two know how to work well together. Then Devin Bush, some disappointing Pittsburgh Steelers players behind Brooks. Then they have Vi Jones, who was a college free agent of 2022, and then Cam Bright, a college free agent from this class, fighting to try to make the roster probably as a special teamer. And behind Wagner, you have John Radigan, who came from, you guessed it, a college free agent, 2021, and Patrick O'Connell, this year college free agent. Once again, the guy who will have to make the team for special teams. And then at right outside linebacker, once again, a position where you might still be looking to try to upgrade, but they do have Uchenna Nwosu and then a draft pick in Derek Hall, who they got in the 2nd round, who has a chance, I think, maybe even to win that job. And then my guy, Alton Robinson, who, of course, they got in the 5th, and to make 144 from that 2020 draft. If this may be sort of it for Alton Robinson. If he doesn't show something more for this year, this may be his last year with the team. Their first pick, and of course, 5th overall, was Devin Witherspoon. I'm a huge Devin Witherspoon fan. He was my number 2 corner, not because he's not really great, but because I thought Mr. Christian Gonzalez was a rare talent. But these are two. I mean, it's slicing the cheese pretty thin. They're both great. And Witherspoon's going to be great for them. I'll be shocked if he isn't very, very good. Then you have Mike Jackson behind him, Artie Burns, who's knocked around the league a little bit, who came as an unrestricted free agent. Then Lance Boykin, a college free agent I really like from Coastal Carolina, who I think makes this team maybe a practice squatter initially. And then another former San Francisco 49er in Benji Franklin, no relation, behind him. And then at safety, of course, the return of the Prez, the return of Jamal Adams, who isn't what he used to be, but is still a really good blitzer, guy who understands what they do there, how they do it, the Seahawk way, whatever you want to call it. Julian Love behind him, another guy who's bounced around, and from the other New Jersey team that says they're from New York, from the Giants. And then you have Christian Young, a college free agent behind him, who has a 50-50 chance to make it, and Jonathan Sutherland battling it out with him, another college free agent. Quandre Diggs, who is back again. A lot of this return trip. Guys who I guess had a round trip ticket, but he's back. And then he's got Joey Blunt behind him, a college free agent from 2022, and an interesting college free agent behind him in Morel Osling, the second. Probably a 50-50 shot to make the team. Tariq Woolen, of course, famously, played at a all-rookie level in 2022, 5th rounder. Then Trey Brown behind him, who they drafted in the 4th in 2021. And Isaiah Dunn behind him, who came from the Jets. And then a couple of college free agents. I think Montre Braswell, I like a little bit better than James Campbell, but both of them are in that special teams practice squad into the roster mix. Kobe Bryant, sold down nickel with Jarek Reed, who they just drafted, who played mostly safety in college, but tested really well. He was a sixth rounder who I thought might even be undrafted or maybe make it to the seventh. I'm not knocking the pick because he fits what they do. They did need depth at nickel. College free agent Arquan Bush, friend of the show, we've had on Draft Central this past draft class. I think he makes the team. Very worst case scenario special teamer, but has a chance to be in that nickel dime back conversation. Then Ty Okada, another college free agent who has about a 50-50 shot to make the team. Michael Dixon, still out there doing it as one of the better punters in the league. Jason Myers, still there. And they have a new long snapper, though. Chris Dull, a college free agent. I mean, all in all, they still are doing what they do the way they do it. John Schneider and Coach Carroll sort of lost the magic, it seemed, for a little while. Maybe they found it again. Do not be surprised if they build once again, at least once more as a team, as a tandem, the team in tandem of Schneider and Carroll get at least one more championship run out of the Seahawks. And that's it.